Hi everybody, I'm so glad that you are back this week for our Sunday school lesson. Today is a very exciting day because we are learning a new verse and we are starting to learn about a new person as well. So lots of exciting things happening. We will go ahead and get started with our new verse. So what we're going to do is I will read the verse out loud. We'll talk about it for a minute and then we'll go ahead and practice it together. So our new verse this week is going to be Romans 3:23. It says, "For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God." Romans 3:23. Now let's talk about what that means. The first section in here talks about how all have sinned. Now we know all means everybody. So that means me, that means you, that means your mom, your dad, everybody you know is included when it says all. Now, what does it mean when it says sinned? A sin is anything you do that is wrong. A sin is something that's against the law of God. So sometimes we think of sins as being big and some sins as being little, but God says that sin is sin. So it says that everybody has sinned. Everybody has done something wrong. And now the second part says that everybody, all, have come short. So what does it mean to come short? That means you haven't gone far enough, right? That's easy to understand. Sometimes when you're playing baseball or you're watching on TV someone play baseball, you see that they're trying to get to the next base, but they don't make it there in time, right? They stop before they get to the base, or they try sliding and they don't make it in time. Guess what? It doesn't count. You didn't get to the base. You're out. Well, God says that everybody has sinned. Everybody has come short of the glory of God. That means that none of us can be like God. Even if we try really, really hard to do what's right, even if we try really hard to listen to our parents and to do good things, none of us can be like God, right? We all have that sin in our hearts. Now that sounds kind of sad, right? But it's really not. And the reason it's not is because of what we've been talking about the past few weeks here. All of us have the opportunity to go to heaven. We all have the opportunity to ask Jesus to take away our sins, to take away all the dirty, ugly sins that we've ever done. And we don't have to live like that anymore. But we know that we need Jesus in order to have those sins taken away. We can't take them away just by ourselves because we will still come short. So let's say this one all together. We'll start with the reference here, Romans 3:23. "For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God." Romans 3:23. All right, let's try one more time and then we'll go ahead and move on. Romans 3:23. "For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God." Romans 3:23. Fantastic. We'll work on that one for a couple of weeks here, so you still have time to learn it. Real quick though, we'll just go over our two memory verses that we've already worked on. John 3:16. Let's say this one all together. Ready? John 3:16. "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life." John 3:16. Good. And then our first verse that we learned, Genesis 1:1. "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth." Genesis 1:1. Fantastic job. Now, you all should have received, hopefully, in the mail, your activity page for this week. If you did not get it, you'll get it in the mail probably on Monday, tomorrow. There's a fun activity to do here. Our new memory verse is listed on this paper, and it's listed on the back of the other paper. So plenty of places you can look at if you forget what our new memory verse is. And then inside of the activity page is our story. So if you forget something about the story or you want to tell somebody else, the story is listed in there as well. Today we are going to be learning about Jonah. Maybe you know this story, maybe you know a little bit about it, but either way, I hope that you listen very, very carefully because here's a special thing that we're going to do this week. This is our 5th week of doing class this way. So if you have been able to listen and watch all of the lessons, all 5 lessons that we've done this way, I want you to have your mom or your dad, whatever adult you have there, send me an email or a text message or call me and let me know that you've watched all the lessons. And this week I will send you a special surprise in the mail. But you have to have watched all the lessons, okay? and I might give you a little quiz to see how well you've been listening to the lessons. So let's go ahead and get started with learning about Jonah. Jonah actually has his own book in the Bible. There's a book in the Bible named after him, so that's pretty special. If you're looking for the book of Jonah, it is a small book in the Bible. In my Bible, it's about 2/3, maybe 3/4 of the way back, and it's in the Old Testament. It's towards the back of the Old Testament. So Jonah is who we're going to learn about today. Now, Jonah was a prophet of God. Back in Old Testament times, before Jesus came to earth and came to be born as a baby, died on the cross, before all of that happened, God used prophets to speak to his people. So instead of having Jesus talk to the people or the Bible to read, they had prophets who were told by God what to tell the people. Well, Jonah was one of those prophets. Jonah's job was to tell the people what God wanted them to know. Well, Jonah lived in Israel, which was a place that had lots of people who loved God and cared about God. But God knew that there were people in other places who needed to learn about God, who needed to learn that what they were doing was wrong, and they needed to do what was right, what God wanted them to do. God told Jonah to go to a place called Nineveh. Can you say that word? Nineveh. That's the name of the city that God told Jonah to go to. Now, Nineveh was far, far, far away, and it was a place that was known as being full of wicked people who did not care about God, who did not care about doing what was right, who didn't want to listen to God's prophets. And you know what Jonah said? No way do I want to go to a place like that. Can you imagine if God told you to go to a place that was full of people who you knew didn't want to listen to you? That would be really tough. Well, Jonah had a decision to make. This is a decision that you make and I make every single day. And that decision is, are you going to obey or disobey? Really, whenever we have any type of decision, those are our two choices. Are you going to obey what God tells you to do? Are you going to obey what your parents or your teacher? Or are you going to disobey? Those are the two options we always have. Now, I think you know which one is the right choice. We all know that Jonah should have listened to God. Just like when your mom tells you to do something, or your teacher tells you to study, or your preacher in church tells you to listen and pay attention to the message, we all know that we need to obey. But sometimes we don't, right? Sometimes we choose to disobey. And that's what Jonah did. Instead of getting on the ship that was going to Nineveh, Jonah decided to get on a ship that was headed the exact opposite way. He decided to disobey. Well, the ship that Jonah was on went out to sea and was sailing along, and you know what Jonah thought? I think Jonah thought for a little bit of time that he had gotten away with his disobedience. He thought he had been able to run away from God, but guess what? God can see everywhere, hear everywhere. He knows everything that's going on. We know that Jonah was not able to get away from God. Jonah was not able to trick God. Instead, Jonah was just disobeying and making things worse on himself. Well, as Jonah's ship was sailing along in the sea, God sent a huge storm. Now, this storm should have been enough to get Jonah's attention and make him think, you know what, I'm doing something wrong. I'm going the wrong way. I'm not listening to God. But you know what Jonah did? Jonah tried to hide from the storm. That's not going to work. Well, the sailors on the ship, they were tossing all their cargo, all the things that they were transporting. They were tossing them overboard. They were trying to get rid of anything that might be making this storm happen. And you know what? It wasn't working. The storm was getting worse and worse. Finally, they went down and tried to talk to Jonah, who was trying to sleep in the bottom of the ship. Remember, he's trying to hide. He's trying to hide from God. He's trying to hide from the storm. He's trying to hide from the consequence, the reaction of being disobedient. Well, the sailors, you know what they decided? This storm has to be Jonah's fault. This guy, there's something wrong with him. So you know what they did? They picked up Jonah, threw him overboard, out of the ship, into the sea. Now, can you imagine how scary that was for Jonah? all of the sudden he was picked up from his bed, thrown out into the cold water that's being tossed all around from this storm. And you know what happened to him? A huge, huge fish. Some people say it was a whale. Some people say it was a huge fish. Guess what it did? It came along and swallowed him up. Now, I don't know about you, but I cannot imagine many things that would be more scary than being swallowed up by a gigantic fish and going down its disgusting, dirty mouth into its dark, gross, slimy throat, into its belly that's full of who knows what, right? It probably stunk, and it was dark, and it was scary. Now, next week we're going to talk more about what happened to Jonah when he was there in that fish's belly. But I want you all to think about this. When we disobey, we don't get swallowed up by a fish. We don't get thrown off a ship. Those things don't really happen to us, right? But the Bible says this. It says, be sure your sin will find you out. And what that means is when you do something wrong, when you sin, remember our memory verse, all have sinned. There's always a consequence to our sin. That means we never get away with it, right? We have an option. We can either pray and ask God to forgive us of our sin, and we can stop doing the sin and start doing what's right. Or we can go through lots of bad stuff as God tries to get our attention and make us think and make us realize that we're doing what's wrong. I hope that this week and going forward all this month and all this year and the rest of your lives, you remember, we don't want to disobey. You don't want to disobey and not do what God tells you to do and not do what your parents and your teachers and everyone tells you to do. We need to listen and do what's right. Okay? Now, let's do this one more time really quick just because we have a new verse. We're going to go over it one more time really fast. Romans 3:23. Let's say it all together out loud. Ready? Romans 3:23. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Romans 3:23. Fantastic. Now don't forget, if you've watched all the videos, have your mom or your dad, anybody, send me an email or call me or text me, and I will make sure that you get a special surprise. All right, I am so glad that you're here to watch this video. I hope that you're learning a lot. Please feel free to call me or email me if you have any questions or if there's anything that I can help you out with. I love you all, and I cannot wait to see you again, hopefully very, very soon. All right, bye-bye.